And I've never worked in a business where it has been empowered teams every day of every week of every year. And I think it's naive if you think that a commercial organization that can happen at scale. It's really dangerous to build a culture where it's not okay for something to come in from the top. Not because I think things should come in from the top all the time, but because when it inevitably does, it will grind your product organization to a halt.
Hello and welcome to CPO Stories, where I speak to the UK's biggest and best executive product leaders, as well as some of the upcoming stars of the future. If that sounds up your street, don't forget to dive into the back catalogue on your favourite podcast app or on YouTube. And of course, follow, share, or drop me a comment or review. It all helps. And if you're a CPO or want to nominate your CPO, do get in touch. I'd love to chat. On this episode, I'm delighted to welcome Georgie Smallwood. Georgie's career has taken her through a variety of countries and companies, including Sleeves Up, Xero, N26 and Tier Mobility, before taking the Chief Product Technology and Data Officer role at Moonpig, a leading online platform for card giving and gifting. So I'm expecting a friends and family discount on my thank you for coming on the podcast card I'll be sending after the show. Georgie, thanks for coming and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jason. It's good to finally be here.
It's been so long. It's like I keep sending the cards and I keep sending the cards and I keep kind of coming back, not at this address, but finally I managed to get through to you. So I'm looking forward to, getting some good, almost like the inside of a greeting card kind of wisdom off the back of this conversation as well. I think this is going to be a good one.
After a couple of years at Moonpig, I'm pretty good at writing a greeting card.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll have time to get into that later because I'm very curious about your card writing etiquette. But Moonpig, let's talk about it to start with, because obviously, I know it, you obviously know it, but it's a very well-known brand in the UK and a few other countries as well. But just in case anyone doesn't send a lot of cards, how would you describe what Moonpig does officially?
Moonpig helps you to connect with the people that you love the most. I think one of the greatest things about technology is that it's enabled us to stay connected with people across the world as the world has become bigger. So in some ways, technology has made the world much bigger than it used to be. But in other ways, it's made it much smaller. And I want to work with technology that makes the world smaller, that makes us feel more connected to people. And so when I got approached about the Moonpig role, literally the purpose of the company is to create moments that matter between people who love each other. And that's what we do every day. I stand in front of the printer at our warehouse in Tamworth and I watch 15,000 cards get printed and all I see is love, 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 mum, dad, miss you, hug you. It's a really incredible product to be a part of and to be able to give those moments to people around the world so that they feel connected with the people that are important to them.
I bet they're not all love, 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 love though. There's got to be some smutty ones in there and some, troll ones in there that people are sending to their enemies as well, right?
There are definite specific picks that can come through, but those get picked up by our sensors most of the time. But love comes in all shapes and sizes, Jason. We can't judge. We're not here to judge.
Hashtag no judgment. But it's interesting to know what you talked about there because, you might naively think, not you personally, but one might naively think that Moonpig's just a card shop, right? Like, somewhere where you can just go and get that last minute card for your anniversary or whatever. Definitely never had to do that, of course, That's something that I never have to worry about.
There is a definite convenience use case there, for sure.
Absolutely. But at the same time, you kind of touched on it, this kind of, you're not really, it's that kind of, drill versus hole kind of metaphor in it. You're not really selling cards. You're selling the connections that the card deliver. So does that kind of almost, you talk a lot about technology as well, and obviously, we'll talk about your remit across technology as well as product in a minute as well, but it kind of almost feels like, that as you say, almost like the product is the emotional connection and the kind of the love that you bring together, but also that comes at a potential risk because that could mean that you could be kind of asked to build just about anything.
Yeah, that is true. You could, it's quite broad, I think we are very focused on making sure that we are the world's greatest gifting companion. We see gifting as the gesture of love. And I think that thinking about how tech has connected us across the world with instant messaging and social media and all of those different things, it's still really amazing to get a card in the mail and to open it up. And, still when my friends and family are, sharing their kids' birthdays or their parents' birthdays, what you see on Instagram is like a picture where you've got the whole dining table filled with cards and a balloon. And so I do really think we need to be really careful when we think about progress and technology, about we can rush blindly into the future of using technology to solve all of our challenges and problems. But we really do need to think about what we could potentially lose. And I think to make it really simple from my perspective, like one could argue that, we send a WhatsApp message on someone's birthday, but it does not replace the fact that one of your friends took the time to create the card, to put something special in it, to put their favorite their favorite photo of you on top of it, and took the time to get that to you for your birthday. If we lose things like the greeting card, we won't get them back. And we need to be really careful that we don't, use technology at the expense of the things that we have had in the past. And I think when you've got kids, this is something that is really clear. Like I watch my teenage children communicate with their friends asynchronously only, right?
Oh yeah.
And they lost something. We lost something along the way, which was synchronous communication. And we didn't realize we were losing it until it was gone. And it's really, really hard to get back for those people that have grown up in an asynchronous communication world. And we're not just losing conversation, we're losing all of the things that come alongside that type of synchronous communication. So I'm really, really passionate about making sure that we leverage technology to really further the things that are good about life, but we don't lose the things that maybe aren't that technology kind of driven in our minds. But that doesn't mean that there's not a huge amount of value in them that we can't replace digitally.
I was going to say, if I were going to be slightly cynical, I might say that someone who's the Chief Product Technology and Data Officer for the leading gifting and physical gift card, supplier might say exactly all of those things because, of course, someone who worked for a tech-only company that was doing NFT thingies or whatever, like maybe they would say completely opposite. But there is a nice, interesting balance there, right? Because you sit there and, Moonpig's 25 years old now? It's pretty ancient in internet standards, but it's also, of course, makes it a established, well-known brand with a lot of scale behind it, a lot of history, a lot of experience. How do you see the mission of Moonpig, and I guess your mission as well as in the position you're in, to try and do all of those things that you just said and make sure that we keep the human connection and the physical at the center of everything, whilst also kind of trying to stay at the forefront of technology as best you can?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And one of the reasons that I find my job so interesting every day, because consumers are changing. And, what was accepted as valuable 15 years ago is not okay anymore. So how do we continue to increase the value? And a lot of the time this comes down to words like personalization or segmentation or those kind of buzzwords. But how do we deliver the experience and the expectation that the customer has when those expectations are coming from a very, very digital world and instantaneous behaviors, etc., into something that by its very nature, one of the reasons why it's so valuable is it's not instantaneous. So, I mean, I faced this in other roles that I've had before, right? In banking, we were building the bank of the future, right? It's all digital. And N26 was one of the first banks not to have branches. It launched Revolut.
Now none of them have branches.
Now no one has branches. Revolut, Monzo, and N26 all launched in the same year. And we were all about the technology. And one of the things that happened in my first year there was a really good example of this. So we were rebuilding login. And we wanted to make it as fast as possible, right? All the consumer research said that consumers want things quickly and instantly, and it shouldn't take like 3 milliseconds longer than accepted to open, or it's not fast enough. We're in a world of double click likes and all of that. What was fascinating about it was that the feedback that we got from our incredibly fast login was that consumers felt it wasn't safe.
Yep.
And that for me was, I am obsessed with consumer psychology, right? One of the reasons I love my job and I like building new things is because I want to be able to move with consumers and with the psychology of them. But the psychology is changing so fast, you need to stay constantly curious about what they actually want and how they want to receive it. And that will depend on the product that you're building, the type of customers that you have, whether you're with early adopters, whether you're a mass market product, all those different types of things. So there's no one size fits all. The only one size fits all is be curious about what you're trying to achieve and what your customers want. And sometimes they don't know what they want. In this instance, this was a really good example. So slowing down login and putting some beautiful experience around it, which had a lock and having it unlock, really solved that problem. But so essentially, I built the really fast login and I slowed it down artificially. And I think with Moonpig, why do we call ourselves, a tech-driven company and a data-driven company? Because we use technology and we use data to create the most personal experience, because consumers expect personalization. And it's not just about the card. It's about the experience in buying the card. It's about the functionality within the card. It's about how those things come together and the right offerings that the customer gets. We have a customer and we have a recipient, which I can talk about a little bit later. How the customer experiences that personalization is different to how the recipient experiences that personalization. And technology and data power that feeling that they get when they think, yeah, this was special.
Well, let's talk about that right now, actually, because, personalization, obviously, there's other stuff that we can talk about that, especially with regards to AI, which we'll come on to in a sec. But that idea of effectively not really being a marketplace as such, because it's kind of almost like a point to point, like one person is buying it and sending it to someone else, or you're sending it, you're fulfilling it for them. But there could be potentially kind of a disconnect between which of those you prioritize for, as a company, who you decide to optimize for.
Mm-hmm.
So, and maybe you balance it out, but is there kind of an idea that, for example, at Moonpig, we'll always put the customer first, or is there something that we'll always put the recipient first, or is there, there's presumably artists and people that you license to get into the platform to get the cards, the designs in and stuff like that. So is there any kind of leveling out and trying to balance between those, or is there like a relentless focus on one or the other?
Do you know what? That's a really good question. And I actually haven't faced that question at Moonpig like I have at other companies. In banking, it was always, is it growth or is it compliance?
Yeah.
There's always a dichotomy of metrics or requirements that you need to have. And I used to abhor that question from a PM, which was like, should I prioritize growth or compliance? I was like, well, both,
yeah.
which is a really unsatisfactory answer for a leader to give. At Moonpig, we don't think about it from a customer versus a recipient perspective. We think about it from, we need to create a moment that matters. And so there are so many elements that need to happen to create that moment, from, getting the customer through the consumer flow, which is an e-commerce flow, to making sure it gets delivered on time, and where it needs to be, when it needs to be there, to unwrapping and how we have that experience for the recipient, and then the experience that recipient has and how do they engage with the card, because we have a lot of functionality within what is actually just a piece of paper, all the way from stickers and photos down to AI text writing and videos and audios and more and more. So making sure that the recipient can experience the love that the customer sent to them in the way that the customer meant for it to be sent. So we don't think about it obsessively as customer or recipient, because the moment can be broken at any point in that journey. And so it's quite a big thing to have to think about. But I also think it's really important, because if you're just focusing on the customer or you're focusing on the recipient, actually you could miss the whole point. And the point is, right, that this is the ultimate gifting companion that creates moments that matter.
So the North Star metric, or in your case, the Southern Cross metric, is the moment itself and all of the stuff that you're optimizing for that, which makes a lot of sense. But you touched on AI just as you were talking about that then, and I'm very curious as to how you're seeing AI within Moonpig as well, because obviously it could change how you build the products at all, but it could also obviously change how your customers interact with the products and maybe even some of their expectations of the product. And of course, it could even be considered to some extent somewhat of a threat as well, because you're sitting there saying, well, actually, whatever the quality is, but I could go and generate hundreds, thousands of card designs now, and that half of them be rubbish, but like I could still do it depending on what I was prioritizing for. So there's that kind of threat of like commoditization of personalization somehow that people can try and bring into it. Obviously, you can try and take advantage of that too, but I guess I'm just curious how you see AI playing a part in your business, both as a kind of opportunity and a threat.
Yeah. So I think it's important first to share how I think about AI. So when yeah, that's right. Get ready. When I don't think about AI as a product. I don't think about it as a productivity tool. I don't think about it as a process enhancer. I think that is missing a bit the point, in that it is a complete operating system shift. So AI can, if you think about it, maybe an analogy is an easier way. We can create an electric car, right? And we can power our cities, with electric lights and all of this stuff. AI is the infrastructure that enables those things to be created. And at the moment, we don't have the whole infrastructure in place yet. And so we're trying to create value out of AI in various different ways, some in consumer products, some in businesses, some in like specific use cases around, IDEs and coding and things like that. And other ways in productivity enhancements and workflow adjustments. But underneath it all, these things have to be powered by a new type of energy. And so I think what we're seeing with how we're thinking about AI in businesses at the moment is the very, very, very beginning of what it is going to be, because we're thinking about it in products, essentially, and how we're using AI rather than the infrastructure, and making sure that the infrastructure of AI is there embedded for the things that you might want to be creating in the future. So we talk about AI as far as product managers is concerned, and we talk about, using prototyping tools or, Gemini note-taking, or, Clockwise. We use Clockwise for meetings, and they're the productized versions using the infrastructure that is available at this point in time. And over the last 3 years, that has been hypey in some respects.
Oh, yeah.
So, and we've been really scrambling for the gem of a productized AI solution. But I think what a lot of the world doesn't yet understand is that those are just the tip of the iceberg, because as the infrastructure becomes embedded, the things that we can do differently in different ways are going to be fundamentally different. They're going to change everything. So I don't push necessarily people to adopt certain specific things. You have to adopt the new mindset. And the new mindset is the way that I did things before is not how I'm going to do things in the future. And I'm going to need to figure out, like, what are the things that I do in my role? And how are those things going to change? And then try as many of these new productized versions as possible, but believing underneath that the product that you're using today is not probably the product that you're going to be using tomorrow. But you need to be open-minded. You need to be curious. You need to be embracing everything that you can touch and feel, because that's how you're going to be leading the pack as far as how your job is going to look in the future.
So that's kind of very much focused on kind of using AI within the organization. But are you seeing any early signals of kind of shifts in customer preferences or maybe competitive landscape where you're sitting there saying, well, actually, we've not only got to change our own operating system, but also to some extent try and keep up with the changes to our consumers and recipients' operating systems as well? Or are people still staying kind of people?
I mean, I think it's, again, I go back to, what type of company product you are and who your customers are. We are a mass market product. Like 1 in 6 people in the UK are a Moonpig customer. And that's important to understand, because in our little tech bubble that we live in, we think everyone is all over this. And the reality is that, it is a epic race in technology, and we are all in it and we are running as hard as we can. But a good product people work out how to use that technology and how to stay in that race and use the innovation, but surface it to our customers in a way that they can consume and a way that they feel comfortable consuming. So what's really interesting is that stickers, we launched stickers, right, inside cards a year or two ago. People love them, right? People know what stickers are in real life, in tangible, touching terms. And stickers decorate things, right? And they make them personal to you. AI stickers is something that we've launched quite recently, and it is booming. Absolutely booming. People love AI stickers because they can relate it to stickers. And because writing a short prompt about what you want your sticker to look like doesn't feel to most people in the world like you're actually using AI. It's just magically generating instantly, which you already expect, the sticker that you wanted, right? So making sure that we are using technology but surfacing it to customers in a way that doesn't feel bracing or too much friction or too much change. You need to take consumers on a journey of using technology and how they integrate it into something that from their perspective they've been doing for 25 years. So you don't need to change it fundamentally. But actually, if you look back at the card that Moonpig was creating 5 years ago and you compare it to the card that you can create today, there is a huge amount of innovation and technology in it. But the art is not alienating your customer while you do it.
Kind of almost just changing it little by little, like the ship of Theseus or something like that, where you're sort of sitting there and in a couple of years or 10 years or 20 years, it's a completely different ship. But yeah, every single bit has been replaced part by part. But
people need it. It's just human psychology, right? Like even if we're talking about AI and AI just in general, humans will lean back from change, right? We do, rightly so. Like we feel good and safe in the thing that we know. So how do we embrace innovation, and you will always have an early adopter customer or an early adopter employee who is diving headfirst into the unknown and not afraid of it and gets energy from it. But they really are early adopters. But if you want to bring the mass with you faster than your competitors are, You need to take them on that journey and give them the steps that they need to embrace this technology in a way that they see value in and they see why they're being taken on that journey.
No, absolutely. You don't get to 1 in 6 by just concentrating on early adopters, right? So obviously something's working. But product management, let's dig into that. So product management at Moonpig, obviously part of your responsibility alongside data and technology as well. But specifically considering like the product team, the product organization that's kind of looking after all of this stuff from your side, like how does that look at Moonpig? Like how big are the teams? How have you laid them out? How do they kind of connect with each other and the rest of the business? Like what's the landscape look like there?
Yeah, so I think we have, in product and design, we have about 41 people. It's not rocket science. I think this
Don't
is
tell them that.
I know, not the Moonpig structure, but I think product structures in general, right? This is my third executive product role. And I promise you, I've done every org design that exists, some that don't exist and didn't for very long either. And what I've learned is that whether you set your teams up in a customer journey flow, or you set them up in tribes, or you set them up in full stack, or you have front end and back end, or you have, it doesn't really matter as long as you don't have a fixed approach to it. You need to be able to flex. Technology, humans, consumers, business is moving so fast. And it feels even faster since COVID, I think, just because, we had this big line in the sand drawn and we went from hyper growth, especially in like pre-IPO VC companies where there was heaps of funding and everything was boom, 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 to just a grinding halt. For Moonpig, it was brilliant because, you can't get to the high street shop to buy those gestures and that be that ultimate gifting companion. And all of a sudden, people realized that Moonpig was there. It was there and it was solving that problem for them. But yeah, I think COVID and the timing of COVID, like I said, drew a line in the sand. And since then, there's been, a lot of disruption globally. Political world is noisy. There is a lot of things going on. Consumer spending is up, it's down, it's up, it's down, it's down, it's up. So, trying to set budgets and targets and things for companies across the world since COVID has been, incredibly difficult. It's not really a stable environment. Okay, so we know that, right? It's like my ultimate mantra to myself in life is like control what you can control, right? And what can I control? Well, I can control what we are doing at the moment, and I control how the teams are set up, and is that the best thing for the next 6 to 12 months, or do we need to adjust it? How do we need to change it? And making sure that you don't lock in plans, teams, structures so hard that they're impossible to change. Even though we all know as good product people that change, causes disruption and it causes challenges to planned roadmaps and impact and all those kinds of things. So we don't want to create orgs so that we can change them. But you also don't want to create orgs that you can't change without a huge amount of friction. So whether you are growing and you're taking things from small, nimble teams, and then you want to move to a consumer journey flow, that doesn't really matter. The thing that I do think really matters, and the teams that I always see working brilliantly, there is a PM, an engineering manager, and a designer. And the three of them work together, right? And there's a lot of product trio, right? Like go back to the original. There's a reason why it exists. And, sometimes you have to make do across teams and you've got people split across things and you've got to do what you've got to do. But it works best when the three of them are there and they're humming along. I always notice at every meeting about product roadmaps or something that I've had in the last 10 years, if I think about the teams where I was like, wow, God, I'm excited about that, it's generally because that trio is really humming.
Well, talking about humming, and also to some extent about your kind of comment about, like, some of the stuff isn't as complicated as maybe some people might try and make you think around, like there are kind of some tried and tested ways of working that seem to, as you kind of put it, kind of work the best. And like that whole trio dynamic, absolutely 100% agree. But there's also this kind of concept of like, well, team empowerment and all of the kind of, what you might call the kind of Marty Kagan school of product management, where everyone's empowered around missions and you kind of lead with commander's intent. And like someone like yourself would be setting the overall vision and strategy, and then the teams would kind of work out their own ways to get there. Do you feel like you're kind of on that track in Moonpig, or is that something where maybe due to some of the dynamics of the business and the kind of the market characteristics that you kind of sometimes have to maybe do a few things that aren't quite like that, but you do your best? Like, how do you see that kind of empowerment journey for Moonpig?
Yeah, I think it's always a blend. I think that business means that things come in from the side, markets change, consumer spending changes, which means that you need to change your plans. I do absolutely believe that when cross-functional teams come together, and I don't just mean product engineering, data design, when cross-functional teams come together to solve problems, that's how we get the best outcomes. I do think that sometimes the time that you have to make the impact means that isn't feasible. And I've never worked in a business where it has been empowered teams every day of every week of every year. And I think it's naive if you think that a commercial organization, in a world where profitability is king, if you think that can happen at scale. I think there are moments in a company's kind of trajectory and lifetime where it hums along for a few months, maybe even a year if you're lucky. But again, going back to being able to flex, it's really dangerous to build a culture where it's not okay for something to come in from the top. Not because I think things should come in from the top all the time, but because when it inevitably does, it will grind your product organization to a halt. And people's satisfaction and belief in their role will be really hit. And so I think the best thing that product leaders can do is be consistent in their behaviors, in the way that they operate. And I think you see that with companies. Revolut, I think, is a really good example. Nikolai pulls no punches about what he expects in that organization. Now, I think that is admirable. I think that it's not somewhere that I personally would choose to work, but not because I don't like the company, but because it's very clear and I just am not at the point where I would make that decision. But he's consistent and he's clear and you know what you're getting. And I think that as a leadership trait is really, really undervalued. I think we spend a lot of time in product, especially with a lot of product books out there, especially maybe more in the last 15 years than the last 2 or 3, where commerciality has become a really big topic. But, we've kind of been trying to sugarcoat product management a little bit. It's all about, empowered building and you're the CEO of the product. Well, no, I tell you what, there is a CEO and they are responsible for the P&L of the organization. So I think that being honest about what you're doing is really, really important. And I think that has been one of the things that I've learnt is the fastest way to disempower an organization is to mismanage their expectations about what's going to happen.
Oh, 100%. I've seen it time and time again, and to some extent even been victim of it in the past. Like this idea that you kind of sold one thing, and maybe because they know what, either because the boss knows what you want to hear to get you into the job, or because maybe they're even kind of deluding themselves to some extent. But just this idea that, like, yeah, sure, you get the person through the door, but then they're immediately going to kind of bump up against reality and start, like complaining or like not doing the best job that they can simply because actually you've got effectively the wrong type of person in, or it's the wrong type of company for them. So 100% it resonates, this whole idea that, like, just be honest, right? And you'll get the type of people that will thrive in your context rather than some idealistic vision of someone that's not going to be happy and probably not even that effective, right?
Yeah, but I think the important part as well of this is you need to be honest, but you also need to be consistent.
Yeah.
So, and that's the magic coupling, because if you're just honest, like the reality
no one comes.
The reality of honesty is that it can change from one day to the next, right? And our job as leaders is to steady the ship. And so you need honesty, yes, but like consistent honesty. So focus on what part of the truth is consistent and minimize as much of the truth that is inconsistent as possible, right? So don't hide it, but try and mitigate it, right? Like no company wants inconsistency and changes all the time. And so that's where as leaders we should try and make things better, is to reduce that so that your honesty is consistent and it can be something that steadies people so that they know what's going to happen. I think one of the interesting things, my roles have been very much focused on growth and innovation and how do we scale, how do we grow, how do we innovate, how do we, do all of those great things with customers. What's really interesting about a lot of people's understanding of growth and scale and innovation is that it is kind of entrepreneurial gets thrown around as a word, but the connotations of entrepreneurial in this sense are that it's like move fast, break things, don't care, just run, go. Like, we'll run fast enough to outrun the mess that we create behind us. Whereas true innovation and true scalable growth needs governance, right? It needs structure. And and this is especially important when we're thinking about facing into AI, right? People mistake governance for control and they mistake experimentation for chaos, right? Whereas actually the best experimentation organization is very structured. Right? It is not chaotic because innovation scales when you put guardrails around it, right? That you have clear standards, responsible use, measurable outcomes. You know what success looks like or what you want it to look like. And that's what makes growth, creativity, and innovation scalable. So I think that's, for me, having worked in kind of VC-backed, crazy, blitz-scaling hypergrowth, all the way through to growing a 25-year-old publicly listed, profitable, incredibly successful mass market business, it's all the same, right? You think that kind of the crazy stuff is noisy, but the crazy stuff is only good if it comes to impact and outcome at the end. And impact and outcome comes from being consistent, from being structured, and being able to scale the outcomes that you want.
No, 100%. But I want to touch on one thing that you brought up a few times around leadership. And of course, one of the most interesting parts of your role at Moonpig is that you're not just the Chief Product Officer. You're not even just the Chief Product and Technology Officer. You're the Chief Product, Technology and Data Officer. And there's enough controversy in certain quarters, including sometimes for myself, around CPTOs, let alone around CPTDOs. So how do you see that? Well, I mean, I guess not even how do you see it? Like, how does that work at Moonpig? Like, you've got a broad remit across, at the very least, 3 overall pillars. I don't know if they all intersect or if you kind of treat them all as separate things that you're just over the top of. Like, how does that work? And what are your feelings in general about the pros and cons of that dynamic of having everything kind of under one head?
So I think the concept of CPTO at Moonpig was valuable for the timing that they were hiring the role for. There was previously different structures involved, but the company was trying to do different things at the time. Like, we spent a couple of years completely replatforming the tech infrastructure. So while we're a 25-year-old organization, we have a very modern tech stack. We're completely serverless, among all of the other cool things that a modern tech stack brings. And so the timing of when the previous CPTO left, or that he had been the CTO beforehand, was that they needed to leverage that technology platform. And it really was about growth and innovation and the functionality and consumers. And so my profile, I think, is what made me the best candidate for the job at the time. I also think that having been through COVID and the funding challenges that happened over that period of time in previous companies, having really large executive teams was difficult. It's just the same as when you need a decision made, right? The more people that are involved in the decision, the harder it is to make.
Death by committee, right?
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things that previous CTOs and myself have done quite well, I've been very lucky to work with great CTOs in the past, is that we always were very, very aligned before going into executive team meetings. So really coming in with one voice was what made it successful. Now, obviously, now I am the one voice. So there is, a lot of pre-alignment that doesn't need to happen, although it does just happen in my brain, which is slightly Jekyll and Hyde sometimes. And so I understood all of that coming into the CPTDO role. I guess I am not a data scientist or a data engineer or a software engineer or a security engineer or an IT service desk person. So there are lots of roles in my organization that I haven't done, and I can't get into the nitty-gritty of the day-to-day work with it. I thought that would be an issue when I started. One of the things that I've always been really passionate about and proud of is that as a product person, I can get into it with, I can't design, but I can definitely get into it with a designer and a product manager and, story map and break things down and unblock problems or, talk to customers or speak to stakeholders. And I could do all of those things. But coming into this role, what I really faced was at scale, I couldn't run the org that way. Because of that, how do I work out, well, firstly, like, where does my credibility come from? Because I think that's really important in a leader. And the second one is, how do I work out like what's going on and if it's the right thing, or we're missing a trick or something's, blocked, but no one's seen it yet. And so on the first one, like, where does my credibility come from? Well, it had to come not from being, knowing the answers or, which I'd already faced in the CPO role, right? When you get into an executive leadership role, you are not there to have the answers, right? You are there to ensure that the answers get created, but you are one brain and there is 40 underneath you as a CPO. And 40 people need to get better answers than one brain. But it is difficult when you know how to do the job. And so when I started this role and I had quite a large engineering organization and quite a large data organization, I spent a huge amount of time listening and asking, like, learning how to answer, teaching myself like the right open questions to answer so that I could get the information that I needed so that I could understand. So I do a lot of seeking to understand. And sometimes that means, I am asking the stupidest questions in the world. I always play back my understanding of architectures or, data platform technology stacks or something like that to make sure that I've at least got the base level understanding so that we can then continue a conversation where I can add value. And so what is really interesting about that is that I would argue that many times if you asked a product manager, an engineer, and a data analyst, like if I'm a good leader, the engineer and the data side would probably be like, absolutely. Like she seeks to understand. She tries to add value where possible. She unblocks us. Whereas with the product managers, maybe sometimes they're like, yeah, she could maybe come up with a little less ideas on what we could do. But I think there's a really good book called Rise by Patty. Can't remember her name, but I'm sure we can find it and put it in the notes. And she talks about leading teams where she wasn't functional expert in the role, and how it does make you a better leader because you cannot solutionize. You also need to figure out how to tell when someone knows what they're talking about or not. Whereas with product, my brain immediately goes to, yes, this person knows what they're talking about because I'm hearing them, and I know that thing too. Or this person, they're not getting it because I get it, and they're not on the same page. But that's not really a great way to do it. It's better to have a way of working out if someone knows what they're talking about by asking them different questions. Right, and seeking to understand more and more and more. Now, I do not get this right every time, right? Like on no level. In fact, probably 6 times out of 10, I'm completely getting this wrong. But I do think that leadership is something that is quite intangible. You don't realize quite how difficult leadership is until you are there. And once you get there, you also then just get more senior in leadership. And then in my head, I thought, well, once you've been a leader, you're doing it for longer, it gets easier. But actually, the more leadership is required, the more difficult it becomes. And in my role, the bit that was the interesting part was leading product needs different things to leading engineering, needs different things to leading data. But I still need to be consistent across the board. So I need to work out what are the things that I do that are the same and you can rely on me for that every time. And then what are the things that I tweak the dial on slightly because I'm talking to a different function and a different job, and therefore different people in those jobs.
No, I mean, that's super interesting. And obviously, maybe we should spend an entire alternative podcast interview talking about that one. But I know that time is short, so we should probably finish up with a few quick lightning questions just to kind of, give you an easy way out. So if you can, put your mind to it and tell me, if you had to write a greetings card to anyone, alive or dead, who would it be? And what would you say?
Oh, I can't say that's political. Who'd I write it to? Do you know what? I would write it to my grandmother. She passed away when I was really young. Her name's Jay. She was an incredible woman. My mum tells me all these amazing stories about her. And I would just love to tell her like how the world has changed and, in good ways and in bad, but also how I'm trying to make sure it's more in good than bad. I think she'd be really proud.
Oh, I'm sure she would. And obviously, something we should probably all send messages back and wonder what they'd say in return. What do you think the biggest myth is about product management?
I kind of want to say it's that you're the CEO of your product, but I think it's because people misunderstand what being the CEO is, right? I think product managers can make great CEOs. But I think that the biggest misconception of product management is that you own anything, right? It's a craft of connecting dots, right? And creating outcomes. And you have to do it without owning anything, right? I always said that the CPO role is the only role in the executive team where you have to deliver and you cannot do it by yourself. Marketing can deliver traffic, sales can deliver revenue, technology can deliver infrastructure. Product cannot deliver anything without those other pieces. And you need to remember that because it's your job to pull it together and you're not the boss. So somehow you need to pull it together by showing people why it's better that way.
No, absolutely. Best piece of career advice you've ever received?
Best piece of career advice. I think it's my own that I've developed over time, and it definitely is feel the fear and do it anyway. The best things are always the scariest. And sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't, but I don't regret any of them.
I embrace the discomfort, get comfortably uncomfortable. Final question. Why should product people consider joining you and the team at Moonpig right now?
Moonpig is a place where you actually get to positively impact people's lives. You're really like, what is better than connecting people with their loved ones? And I think that sometimes when we're building products, we talk about purpose-driven and we talk about lots of other buzzwords. But at Moonpig, you get to use the best technologies to actually connect people across the world. And I just don't think that there's a better thing that you can do with our talent.
No, here. Well, where can people come and find out more about the company and I guess about yourself, maybe connect up and reach out?
Yep. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. The Moonpig LinkedIn page is brilliantly run by our fantastic talent team. Feel free to connect with me myself. If I don't get back to you, chat with the girls in the talent team at
Never
Moonpig.
happens. You always get back to people instantly, George. We all know this.
Only 3 years, Jason.
Only 3. Well, look, I'm looking forward to having our next chat before that. But anyway, no, I'll make sure to link that all into the show notes, try and find that book as well, and hopefully have a few people coming and changing the world with you. But all I can do now, Georgie, is thank you very much for taking the time to share your CPO story.
Thanks, Jason.